Hello. Well, hello everyone. This is the fourth session of the Anti-Book Club. Probably the last one I'll do uh, for this month. And sorry, it's kind of been a little bit of a rough week uh, health-wise, so I wasn't really able to complete the whole presentation for this. So it's kind of kind of shoddy. So I might just improve it later. But thanks for thanks for attending though. Uh, okay, so this is the first session. So the Anti-Book Club. It's just well, just like another event series where members just come and talk about recent things that they've been reading that they found interesting, and just presenting them, present their findings, trying to share it publicly with the other members so that they can also learn about uh, some things that's going on at the frontier since it's such a diverse space. So that's kind of just like a way of us sharing more information. Okay, now I'm just gonna move on to the next slide. And so for this session, uh, and so I'm just gonna be going over uh, institutional experience with Seemay Chou, and also I think distributing innovation with Vita Dao. And so both of them are podcasts. Oh yeah, our podcasts recordings from the Idea Machines podcast, hosted by Benjamin Reinhardt. He's working on uh, private ARPA and looking at institutional experiments for new innovation systems. So for this one, as you can see, I put the title up there. It's probably a little too big, but so this institutional experience with Seemay Chou. Uh, Seemay Chou is the CEO and co-founder of Arcadia Science. I'll probably include that as a note later on, but so these are just like the notes I took on the episode. So Arcadia is a institutional experiment in of itself. So one of the interesting notes was Ben asked CHL how she would describe Arcadia. She described it in two ways. First was a research and development company, looking at non-model organisms, which I thought was really interesting. I don't really know, practically anything about biotech stuff, so that was a really cool thing to learn about. And additionally, as a meta science experiment, like how do you find new ways to do discovery and innovation and exploration? And I thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about it. And from her point of view, it seems of she really sees Arcadia as like really just like a hypothesis, like like we don't necessarily know if this is like the way to go about making a new innovation system, but we want to give it a try and see where it takes us. So that was a really interesting take. Usually, sometimes you have more certain certainty when people describe their organization's products once they've come out, and it's like, well, it's kind of like, well, I mean, they haven't really shown yet that's what they're doing works, but we'll find that out. I kind of just like how to frame that. It's like it's an experiment of itself. And I also really like the way she described how she came to develop Arcadia, and not very linear process at all. More like just realizing that's like after also founding Trope Labs, which is like another startup that deals with trying to get findings from ticks. See if we can develop biotech from ticks. This led her to understand like 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 the way she's doing things. Uh, doesn't necessarily have to be uh, more of the academic way, and that's ways of producing scientific knowledge have changed over time. So there's no reason why we have to stick with what we have, and so kind of like that epiphany for her led to her to consider making Arcadia. I thought that was a really interesting thought that she had. And that leads to the second point: scientific activity should be structured dependent on the project's goals. And so that was part of it too, is that like the type of science that she's trying to do Arcadia isn't something that's necessarily something that's for academic. It's not like an open-ended project that you would have with a PhD. It's something that's much more goal-oriented, trying to not just produce knowledge but also produce a product. So it's not that might not necessarily in academia, but it's still science, but just not necessarily that place. So I thought that was interesting to talk about. I also really like how they kind of set up a sandbox at Arcadia where where people like this pretty much how they source their ideas, where people can come have like I think might be like a monthly or weekly session, and people just come present on ideas they have, and then any problems they have. So this way, everyone kind of has an idea of what's going on. But also, it's like if someone has an idea, and it's like, well, let's hear it out. Because of course, you never know how good ideas at the beginning. Because once you have it, it's just like it's just an idea, and then kind of work through it. And it's like you never really know where it's gonna take you till like you truly work on it. So that was really interesting way of sourcing ideas, but also just the whole brainstorming process, just like ways of do brainstorming. So this way, ideas don't get just like stuck in well stuck with people or hitting notes. Like here we can just share it and see where it goes, and probably don't need to worry too much about uh, like having your idea stolen or really worry about someone's yeah really more the stealing ideas really like Arcadia really tries like which I think is really interesting to promote more of contribution tracking and try and track what everyone did instead of just it's like, oh, the people were involved, but it's like, well, this person did that, this person did that, so this we can more of a collaborative effort. So everyone can contribute, and you don't that's not to worry about like, well, who's getting the credit. It's like technically everyone will get some credit. So I thought that was a really interesting way of just doing brainstorming. And then process not outcomes. I thought that was a really good point that she made, is that for R&D company, you should really focus on your process, not on what you're supposed to be getting out of it. This really anything research is really more. It is just a process, and then the knowledge, the artifacts that come out of it are just the byproducts of a good process. Well, of a process. And I thought she had a really interesting point about productive rate of failure. It's like what's a acceptable rate of failure for you know for ideas, and I was like, oh, that's actually a really good point, because not necessarily every idea is going to turn out well, but things like you do want to explore your ideas. So like how like what's our acceptable rate of failure, and how do we know that we somewhat failed enough to to have enough success. Then moving on to the next point, people feel do their best work when they feel inspired to have agency. I thought that was a very good point, and I think kind of relates to Seemay's own story of like trying to get some well more agency in how she conducted science and finding ways that were more amenable to her. I think that's a really good point, and you do see a similar trend also in other fields of work as well. So I thought that's a really good point, especially when you have somewhat of specialized specialized roles like that. When having more agency, I think, plays a big role with more specializations. And a really cool part was that you know they like journalists or projects before handing them out to specialists. Was that kind of countering the problem of like somewhat people being good starting projects but not finishing them. So like as Steve was saying, and they'll have like somewhat of generalists who will start a project, work on it till it reaches a point where uh, you can develop milestones, and then it can be taken off their hands and given to a specialist who can further develop it, so that this way you can have journalists and specialists working together, and so the specialists will take things further along, uh, and so this way you have people who can start projects really well and leave it to people who can finish them off really well and take them off from there, and so I I just thought that was a really interesting way of combining the two. And that's by sort of going about it this way. It means that your specialists themselves don't need to have like all-encompassing knowledge. They can just focus on their specialization, while you can leave the generalists to just make the general stuff. And so this way you can have like a really nice pipeline where it's like just most ideas aren't necessarily very special till later on, and it's like okay, now this very very specialized. I think that's a really really interesting point about pairing journalists with specialists. Next bullet is cross-pollinating a role for ideas. I thought this one's really cool too. You have that's some little notes in there, but really it's like it's like oh we have all these ideas, but we need someone to kind of like manage knowledge and connect it all together. So it's kind of like we need like personal knowledge management. Well, actually, maybe like enterprise knowledge management. Sorry. So like just to match knowledge and have people who kind of act like curators or librarians who connect all the dots together, or yeah, I mean, could even say like librarians, just connect all these dots together for us so that we can figure so we can connect everyone's dots. And I thought that was actually like a really good point. Is that you can because you're gonna produce large bodies of knowledge, but it's like you know, uh, you know, because of course it's more powerful when it's connected all together. And then this way you can see what everyone's working on, how things have developed. Like, oh, you might find that's in one area, this works very well with this, and this way you can do more associative thinking. Okay, and then to the next point, for-profit versus non-profit. I thought it was an interesting one. So some of Seemay's concerns, but like because she was originally considering Arcadia to be a non-profit, but chose to be a for-profit, and so her thinking was that, excuse me, was that at least from talking with other people, problem that you have with nonprofits is that just also the compliance aspect of maintaining your nonprofit status. Uh, it's hard to convert from a nonprofit to a for-profit, which is very true. And her main desire was to commercialize products, so not just develop uh, uh, knowledge products, but also so you can put to in the market. So those are her reasons for going with for-profit instead of nonprofit. I think that actually does make a lot of sense. And it really just depends on what you're trying to do. And that's kind of the same with any like legal structure. Like depending on what you're trying to do, that determines your structure. And then scientific success versus financial failure. I thought that was a really good point. Like, what metrics are you evaluating yourself based on? And so for Team made a really good point. It's like, well, like if it turns out that Orchidea is a scientific success but a financial failure, like have we failed? And like, and that's when she talked with her investors about, and they're like, well, even if it financially fails, like we're fine as long as there's some sort of scientific success because you can do something with the science. And I think that's a really good point. Is that I mean, if there is financial failure, there still could be successes there, and it's something you see with like in the startup system all the time. Like startups come and go all the time, but like someone might develop something that just didn't work very well, or maybe it could work well, but just like was wrong timing for the to get market at that time. And it does happen, and so something like that. You know, with the it's like sure there's a failure, but there's still like some progress and success as there might be technical success or even like a business innovation, or social success. Kind of like a I was kind of like thinking of Vine, like Vine itself was it's pretty much just like TikTok, but then like why was Twitter not able to keep Vine on, but then now we have TikTok and it's like well now it's like much more accepted, like you can actually do it. So like why did Vine not succeed where TikTok failed? Oh sorry, where TikTok succeed, why did the where Vine failed compared with where TikTok succeeded? Like what was the difference between these two? Because pretty much kind of the same thing. And I think that's just the point of like oh you can learn from this to develop something else, and that's something that Seemay also mentions. Like, oh, we really do want to like have a like a really good knowledge base of all the successes and failures of just like and just attempts. So this way we can develop a knowledge base and use that to figure out better ways of making progress, better new innovation systems. Because it's going back to the point of like scientific success versus financial failure. It's like it's all about the framing. I think Steve just made a really good point about just like how do you frame success, failure, and like what are your metrics for success and failure. Because ultimately what you choose to measure is what determines success or failure, and also kind of like where you're in. As I was saying with startups with Vine and TikTok, and of course there are also like other examples of companies trying things and just didn't like go well, but then other companies do it and then it does. Kind of like with like Sega and Sony's PlayStation. Like Sega when it came out, I'm forgetting the name of the device, but it came out in the 90s. But like it was super like advanced, but yet it didn't like pop off. But then you had PlayStation, which wasn't as advanced, popped off, and then PlayStation started adopting more of those features that you saw with like its old Sega video game system. So it's like sometimes it's, it could just be bad timing, it could be bad marketing. There's so many reasons why something could be a success versus a failure. And of course, that Sega video game system was like a technical success, but technically a financial failure. And the you don't necessarily always get both of them. And I think that's just an important point to make is that you can succeed in certain areas while failing in other ones. And then lastly, recruiting for Arcadia's sake. I thought seemed to be a really interesting point. It's like if you're starting to like work at Arcadia, it's not to seemingly to ensure your career. If you want to be an academic lawyer, like turns out fine. Like she can only focus on Arcadia, so she only wants people who want to work at Arcadia. And if if Seemay passes, then like the main team passes, like like she has to like what do you continue on with Arcadia if everyone like passes away tomorrow. I thought that was like a really good question. It's just like I would be like how determined are you to like make this a success? And it's like nothing wrong with like if you really do want to succeed in academia instead of doing the thing to doing Arcadia. Like I think that's pretty fine either way. I just really like the point she made. It's like, well, we can't, really budget for other people's success. We have to budget for Arcadia's success. And so you got to recruit for Arcadia's sake, not for the individual scientist's sake. I thought that's just a really good point about just like, the organization versus the people in the organization, and just, sometimes you have to, just put the organization's goals over the, what maybe the goals of a potential applicant. But I think it makes sense in that case because you have to maintain Arcadia, and you can't necessarily maintain everyone's or meet everyone's goals and prerogatives because once again, your goal is to make Arcadia successful, and hopefully the other person comes and joins. Arcadia being successful also means they'll be successful with their goals. So that was my notes on fun institutional experience with Seemay Chou. It's a very, very great episode. Definitely listen. Uh, I'll include the link in the show notes later. All right, now I'm just gonna move to the next one. Okay, so yeah, distributing innovation with the Pizza DAO. Yeah, Beta DAO core team. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's Beta DAO or Vita DAO. I think in the podcast they said Beta DAO, so I'm hoping I'm saying that right. That's why I'm just like in the beginning of the episode they actually start, Ben asks like, hey, how do you actually pronounce the name of this thing? So yeah, Beta DAO. Hopefully that's correct. It's also another really interesting episode. With Beta DAO trying to somewhat democratize funding for longevity research. So yeah, here we go. My notes like, what's the goal of Beta DAO? It's democratize, access to decision making, funding, and governance of longevity therapeutics. And that's the goal. And they gotta look for people who are in between, a lab and a startup, so people having some problems in the translation area, and giving them funding and other resources so that they can, get their stuff out, hopefully to the market. Hopefully, you know, things turn out well. And then, also mention the IPNOT framework, which is a framework that they, you know, uh, that some of the founders of the core team via DAO helped create. I think especially Paul. I can't pronounce his last name. I don't want to screw that one up too. Paul at Molecule make the IPNOT framework, which is legal contract and that storage layer is like storing kind of like a memorialization of a contract on chain and having it be transferable as an NFT, and also linking that with a real world legal contract. And I thought that was actually kind of like an interesting one. Kind of have looked into that with like Ricardian contracts, so it would kind of fall under that one as well. Like, and theirs is actually like really good. I really like the way they go about this because it connects our traditional legacy systems with Web3. So this way you don't, you have the on ramp instead of just like here's Web3, it's only Web3, and like most people aren't in Web3, so like how can they interact with you? So that's why I really like how that's Beta DAO with their IPNT framework and making sure that it can connect them with the outside world. And so the big goal, of course, is to try to future-proof their IP just in case anything happens. And so at least like IP stands for intellectual property. Sorry about that. And a really interesting thing they do is that they don't just like make things up themselves. I really like how they interact with outside parties to really figure these things out instead of just like how we're gonna make a NFT and it's gonna have IP. Because I've seen some projects try to do like IP NFTs, but they don't like consult with people and who actually work with IP, and because then you end up with situations where you make the thing, but it's like you can't actually even use it. It's like might not. So that's what I really liked about Be Adult, that they actually do consult with third parties who understand IP. And really interesting they mentioned was like just the lack of case law around enforcing IP as NFTs. So since we don't really have any cases on that or litigation, we are seeing some that was like enforcing their software licenses. But then again, like we've already seen that before, so that's not necessarily like anything new. But like what could be new is just just trying to force things, force it off chain and then rectify it on chain. So that's kind of like the main shift. But you know, uh, but yeah, as they were saying, like we just need more case law on this to like really understand like this is IPMT framework, like how 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 future proof is it actually? And so the next point, the DAO contracts with agents to fulfill work on its behalf, but the capital remains with the token holders. I thought that was a really good point. So you have these agents, the DAO, hires these agents to do work for the DAO. Because of course the DAO is just a group, but then it's kind of like any organization. You can always hire people to do work on your behalf. So nothing like too strange about that. Actually, it's actually pretty normal. The only big change is just like, oh well, it's now, but overall like the actual practice itself is pretty traditional. So like no big, just at least in my mind, there's no big change there. But the part I really do like is like it's like sure we have all these agents to do all the work for the DAO. It's like of course that hopefully when they do the work they'll be in the furtherance of the DAO and get the DAO in trouble. And really the most important part for them is like we keep the capital with its own holders, and which is pretty much like traditional organizations do like right now. So kind of like follow along with that pattern because I think it's actually like a pretty decent pattern. And then core teams and stewards handle most activities while members generally vote on big funding matters. So it's going to like how Pizza DAO is organized. So I think they've, at least they passed some governance proposals early on to create a core team, create working groups, which are the stewards, and they handle most of the activities, while the members just handle big funding decisions. So very much like a cooperative. I think they even say that on their site that they're an open cooperative. So they operate very much like a cooperative, but much more like an investing uh, cooperative. And then here's the guys pipeline. So it goes from discussion to proposal, on-chain voting. So in the discussion phase, as pretty much like on Discord, it's off-chain. People just discuss an idea, and then there's some traction. Then someone will write a proposal, and they'll post that on their discourse forum. And excuse me, an idea on that. Discussion. Improvement of the proposal, and then when when you think it's good, you can put it up for a vote on chain. So the whole ideation and development of the proposal is pretty much off chain, but then the final conclusion, which is the vote, is done on chain. So a good mix of off chain and on chain. And they had a really good point about just like the rise of Discord for DAOs. Like why is Discord so popular for excuse me Web3 projects? And it's really affected so some of the earlier DAOs went to Discords and some other people followed, kind of copycatting. But then also since they all went there early, people built tools for DAOs on Discord, Discord bots. So it kind of just built that network effect, and it's like well now you kind of have to go to Discord because that's where all the tools are and that's where everyone is. So I thought that was just a really interesting point, but like oh why they're even on Discord. Okay. And then to the next point, the DAO grew through self-selection around the DAO's purpose and vision. Uh, and so I thought it was a really interesting point. It's like, oh yeah, so it's just like, here's just like having like a real, like a true white paper, but like here's a paper. And then really, I think it was like, it might have been Tyler Galato and Paul kind of just talking about, you know, the, uh, the idea of Vita DAO and then other people, like the original core team, just like, you know, it was pretty much like Paul and Tyler, and then some of the rest of the core team came and got involved. They really liked the idea and the vision, and then some other people started coming, and like so it kind of just like grew organically from people just being interested in this idea and this kind of a shared purpose and vision. And then there's the Sheridan example. So this one's pretty. I thought this one was a good example, just like being open. So they say in the podcast the core team Vita DAO. Talking about like, oh, how should we do this like application process? People were joining and just working on stuff even without getting paid. They were just doing things, which I thought was awesome. But it's like, oh, we should really have a good application process because we really want good people. And so the other case for Ali Sheridan, who originally got rejected, but then didn't care. He just went to the Discord. I think just started adding code on GitHub and just started improving things. And now Ali Sheridan's like the technology lead. And it's like, yeah, that's then that made them realize like, oh, there's like no point in us even having an application process. Just put out what you're working on, what you need, and hopefully people will self-select to do those tasks, or they can write a proposal for a task they themselves want to do. So I thought that was a really interesting way of just like the growth of it. It's like, oh, you don't need to screen people out. You can just let them know what you're working on. If they want to work on that, great. If not, they can submit their own proposal, or they can just leave. More self-selection. And then there's the cash type beta token, which is their governance token. So something it's about also gives no dividends, so there's no return for holding this token. It's solely governance rights. So you get to govern, make those decisions on what gets funded, what doesn't get funded, how things are supposed to be commercialized or not commercialized. So you can make all those choices, and you have to participate to receive the token. So once again, very much kind of like a cooperative, and then the IP is co-owned via the DAO, which is really important. So even if a member leaves, like they can't take in the IP with them. It's all stays with the DAO. Okay, and then the next point, IP in third peers was IP in other areas. I thought that's an interesting point that Ben was making, was that like the model for Vita DAO like seems to work really well. However, doesn't work really well because there's like a one-to-one relationship between the IP made in therapies research and the actual products. While in other areas you might not have that one-to-one relationship. So I thought that was just a good point. It's like how replicable is the Vita DAO model for in areas where you don't necessarily have that one-to-one relationship. So I thought that was an interesting one. Though I do think there's a lot of things about Vita that are replicable. I I think the IP one is where you do run into some issues because of course you deal with different types of IP. When you deal with different types of IP, there are different things you have to do and different ways you have to protect them. So that in itself could be an issue. I thought really cool part that you mentioned was like the with this bullying hardest parts of in the community and value proposition. The hard part wasn't like getting the bank account or setting up the like the legal structure. It's like hard for us like, oh, like what kind of community do we want? What value are we proposing to give to people, and how are we gonna put two and two together? I thought that was a really good point about like just like what the hardest part is actually just building everything. Now it's really the either like the legal and tax stuff is like how do I like what kind of community do we want to have, and also how do we provide value to that community and also to others, like what's your value proposition. uh, and so the next point, speeding up funding deals and payouts. I thought this was a really interesting point as that they're saying was that how they speed up deals, and this goes back to like their IP NFT framework. Excuse me. Was that at least when they work with most university tech transfer offices, uh, like it's really easy to work with ViaDAO, and like ViaDAO does things pretty fast, and like for the research that they fund, like they get their funds really quickly, so it's just like faster turnaround time. And I thought that was interesting. And then going back to the IPNFT framework, one of the things I mentioned was like when they interact with university tech transfer offices, this for the IPNFT framework makes some sense because they just use standard contracts which are already used for research sponsorship with these tech transfer offices and with the researchers, so that way they don't have to like reinvent the wheel. They can just use the existing legal frameworks that are there. And and additionally to like tech transfer offices don't necessarily mind working on them. It's just like of course you need some agent, some legal agent to actually take on the contract with the sponsorship, and then of course they are allowed to sub-license it to another one. So that's usually how it works. Is that that's like Molecule will get licensed, will get the contract with a tech transfer office or another entity, and then they'll sub-license it to I think beat it out. But really like overall though, it's just like I just really like the fact that they sub Rails where that work for both Web3 and or more traditional legacy systems. I just think it's a really good way of bringing both together because most people don't use Web3. Most things aren't powered by Web3. So most you can't really just throw Web3 at people and just tell them to use it. Like it's not gonna work. So that's really like how they're approaching that. Finding ways to connect both worlds. And then I thought the last point why blockchain was really interesting because I think Ben made really good points like, oh, this is kind of just like a spreadsheet, and it's like if it's just a spreadsheet, like why does anyone need a blockchain? Because you could technically do all of this without a blockchain. I thought the guys made some good points, but still still off. But at least their main concern was decentralization, just like like who has control over the spreadsheet. They're like, well, in some cases, like government has control of the spreadsheet, but then I don't think that really changes too much with the blockchain because technically, you're not in control of the spreadsheet. It's really the miners, and if you're not a miner, like you're technically not in control of, of the blockchain. So I think that's where it got a little quirky because it's like trying to justify why you use the blockchains can be a really tough claim. But I think they make some good points. The core team about just like why you're using it's like, well, one, we have more transparency. Uh, you know we're trying to say control, which I feel as if it's there's something to that, but also not necessarily completely not necessarily everything completely changes with that. As you're just kind of transferring the system to the system's run by one person, but now you're switching to system technically run by multiple persons. But I can't necessarily say that's better because as we technically don't know what those miners will ever do. So we kind of have to have confidence that they'll do the right thing, or at least believe that the incentives have been set up, at least in a way which will lead to such actions. So I thought that was kind of like a tricky one for the core team to answer. But at least on like where those advantages come from. It's like one that's more transparency. You can just the funding, like how much do you have funds, who's involved. You can see all the token holders. Like it's much more transparency. It's easier to transfer money. At one point they were making us like like some one of the transfers like you might need to transfer this with like a traditional bank account or you might need to use Swift, but it's like you could just use blockchain crypto and be same thing but just faster. So at least in that regard, there are like actual advantages. I just think it's kind of a hard thing to really explain them sometimes. But just in terms of transparency, uh, faster transactions, and then you can also just you can also just say like transparency, fast transactions, and ability to just allocate capital itself could also you could say somewhat be quicker just because of there's more transparency and faster transactions. It's like in those regards, and then they were mentioning the centralization. So like you could I mean technically it is an advantage having going to a more distributed system than having just a centralized system. So like that is part of the advantage is decentralization. But I feel so that's is important, but also just needs to be qualified because it can lead to people just saying decentralization, and then when something like centralized happens, they're like surprised and like, oh, how could this happen? It's like, well, this wrestling is decentralized doesn't mean that you can't have centralized actors doing things. So I think that's just something that needs to be qualified when you say like benefits of blockchain. But overall, I thought they did a pretty good job explaining the benefits, and at least for their use case, like it makes perfect sense to actually do it that way. And so yeah, those are my thoughts on uh, the string animation with the Beta DAO core team. Thanks for stopping by and listening to the session. Hopefully you found it informative. I'll include the slides in the episode notes. Hopefully I got to improve the presentation in the interim. So yeah, thanks for listening, and hopefully come by for the next session.